This is the Xiaomi 15, not the Xiaomi 16, but the Xiaomi 17. This video offers a comprehensive comparison, so is this generation worth upgrading? We're currently holding the black Xiaomi 17 Standard Edition. The two generations are roughly the same size and weight, with a 6.3-inch screen measuring less than 72 millimeters wide, making it comfortable to hold in one hand. The thickness of the two models is comparable, but the camera cover on this generation uses a tapped design rather than wrapping around the entire lens like the previous generation. This makes the camera less prominent, but that's just appearance. The protrusion on both models is roughly 3.6 millimeters, so which design do you prefer? The front features a 6.3-inch OLED screen from TCL Washing Optoelectronics with narrower bezels to 1.18 millimeters, making the difference visually quite small. The most noticeable difference is the larger corners on this screen, which provide a more natural look at wider angles. The measured maximum manual brightness reached 647 nits with a brightness difference of 11 nits across the 6 zones, which is quite good. The global brightness reached 1,115 nits, a slight improvement compared to the previous generation. Eye protection is provided by full-time dimming, and the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor is comfortable. In terms of performance, the Xiaomi 17 debuted the 5th generation Snapdragon 8 Elite Edition with a 4.1% LPDD R5X and UFS combination, achieving a top Antutu score of 3.66 million. The Xiaomi 15, equipped with the previous generation Snapdragon 8 Elite, achieved an Antutu score of 3.05 million. This represents a roughly 20% improvement in benchmark scores. However, Xiaomi's new phones tend to be more conservative with their tuning, so we'll need to wait for several OTA releases. A closer look reveals a 7% CPU improvement, primarily in AI capabilities. The GPU saw a 15% improvement and storage saw a 27.5% increase. The UX performance improved by 36%.
In Geekbench 6, the Xiaomi 17 achieved a single-core score of 3,122 and a multi-core score of 9,825, showing significant improvements in multi-core performance. The Xiaomi 17 also performed better than the Xiaomi 15 in terms of read and write performance. Of course, benchmarks are just a reference. Let's look at gaming scenarios, testing several mainstream games: Honor of Kings, Game for Peace, Genshin Impact, and Star Wars. Let's start with low load. Both phones managed a frame rate of 120.2 frames per second in Honor of Kings, but the Xiaomi 17 achieved a 118.1 frames per second at 1% low, outperforming the Xiaomi 15. Its frame stability index and power consumption were also significantly better. The back temperature reached 37.7 degrees Celsius, 1.4 degrees Celsius lower than the Xiaomi 15. Game for Peace reached 59.9 frames per second, an improvement of 0.1 frames per second, and the 1% low frame rate increased by 7.6 frames per second to 46.7. The maximum back temperature reached 36.6 degrees Celsius, a 3-degree decrease. Moving on to the heavily loaded Genshin Impact, the Xiaomi 17 managed 60 full frames per second at the highest quality setting for 20 minutes, while the Xiaomi Mi 15 failed to reach full frame rate. The frame rate graph also shows that the Xiaomi 17 is more stable in terms of jitter. The 1% low FPS rate improved significantly, jumping from 30.8 to 46.8, an increase of nearly half. Power consumption dropped by 0.4 watts, and the temperature dropped to 38.1 degrees Celsius, a 2.9 degrees Celsius drop. Xiaomi's tuning of Genshin Impact is quite impressive. Regarding battery life, Xiaomi has increased the battery to 7,000 mAh, a significant improvement for a small screen phone. Wireless charging remains unchanged at 50 watts, but wired charging has been increased to 100 watts. However, a dual C-port charger has still not been added, suggesting a continued focus on A to C charging. The battery consumed 32% of its charge in 3 hours of typical use, which is certainly sufficient for battery life.
The first minute and a half of fast charging is measured with a maximum power of 19 volts, 4 amps, and 86 watts. It recovered 14% in 5 minutes and 25% in 10 minutes, with the majority of the time remaining around 40 watts. Finally, a full charge was achieved in 56 minutes. Finally, regarding imaging, Xiaomi maintains its 350 megapixel lenses. The telephoto lens has undergone minimal changes, with a floating upright telephoto lens supporting 10 centimeters macro. The Xiaomi 17 boasts slightly stronger color depth and clearer images, but the algorithm still differs in rendering at extreme ultra telephoto settings. The ultra-wide-angle lens has undergone a significant change, switching from the GN1 to the OV50M. The viewing angle has also narrowed from the previous generation's 115° 14mm to 102° 17mm focal length, creating a noticeable visual difference. While the 17mm focal length is certainly easier to use and better at distortion control than the 14mm focal length, it does offer a less extensive depth of field. The main camera is the Light Hunter 950, a minor iteration of the previous generation. Instead of the previous generation's 7-pixel lens, it now uses a 1 GHz 6-pixel lens with a high transmittance WLG glass lens. The overall rendering is minimal, with a slight improvement in light intake and detail. Considering the limited use cases for ultra-wide-angle shots, this generation's imaging is essentially a minor improvement. In summary, the standard version of the Xiaomi 17, which lacks a bezel and is Xiaomi's flagship product, is powered by the 5th generation Snapdragon 8 Extreme Edition, offering significant improvements in energy efficiency, power consumption, and battery life. So do you think this generation of Xiaomi 17 is good enough for you, or just thinking about iPhone 17?